From the end of the Blitz in May 1941 until late January 1944, Luftwaffe bombers had continued to attack British cities. However, the number and intensity of raids had dropped dramatically. This 2.5-year period became known as the lull. This all changed on the night of the 21st of January 1944, when substantial German air raids resumed on London in the so-called Little Blitz, as the Luftwaffe launched Operation Steinbock in retaliation for the British saturation bombing of major German cities, particularly Berlin. The Southern Railway's Wimbledon East sidings was badly damaged at 1:05 in the morning when it was hit by high-explosive bombs, wrecking many wagons and damaging the permanent way. Very few of the hundreds of bombers that set off that night found their intended target of the Waterloo area. Most of their bombs and incendiaries fell over a wide area of the home counties. During recovery and clearance work later that day, one of the steam cranes toppled over, injuring its driver. This was soon uprighted and re-railed by the other 2 cranes working on the site. The night's operation had been something of a disaster for the Luftwaffe, with the loss of 40 bombers. They had been thwarted by a combination of the lack of experienced crews both in the bombers and the Pathfinders which preceded them, and hugely improved British electronic countermeasures and fighter interception. The heavy British defences, spearheaded by RAF Mosquitoes, forced the Luftwaffe to fly meandering dog-leg courses to their target, causing the inexperienced German crews to quickly get lost. This first raid coincided with the Allied landings at Anzio, resulting in 3 of the bomber groups allocated to Operation Steinbock being transferred back to Italy. The attacks continued on through February and March, and on the night of the 21st of March 1944, the Great Western's Paddington Station was hit in a particularly heavy raid, which killed 62 people across the capital. Just after 1 o'clock in the morning, a high-explosive bomb smashed through Paddington's roof, and exploded close to the buffers between platforms 6 and 7, causing much damage to the roof along with the platform structures and track work. Fortunately, no one was killed in the blast, as there were few people around on the station at that time of night, although 4 passengers and 8 railway staff were injured. Platforms 4 to 8 had to be closed while the repair operation was rapidly put into action. Train services continued to use the station from the other unaffected platforms. At the start of Operation Steinbock, a force of 524 bombers had been amassed by the Luftwaffe, a mixture of Junkers, Dornier, Heinkel and Messerschmitt aircraft, many of which had been transferred from the Italian front. Such was the scale of the German losses. By mid-March 1944, that force had been reduced to 232 serviceable aircraft. The clear-up operation was completed in just 5.5 days and included much work to replace and support the damaged sections of the station roof. Designed by Isambard Kingdom Brunel, Paddington Station was opened in May 1854. Brunel had been deeply influenced by the design and construction of the Crystal Palace for the Great Exhibition of 1851, and this can be seen in his use of wrought iron and glass in the 699 feet long 3-span roof at the station. Constructed along Eastbourne Terrace, this was, at the time, the largest train shed roof in the world, with a main span of 102 feet and 2 smaller ones of around 70 feet. "32 people were killed across the London area in a raid by about 115 aircraft on the night of the 24th of March. The Southern's Chessington branch was closed for 16 hours after a bomb fell on the track between Motspur Park and Malden Manor. At this stage of the war, the railway's permanent way gangs were well versed in repairing damage such as this to the tracks, and the bomb crater was soon filled in and the permanent way replaced to enable train services to operate again. Opened in 1939, the short Chessington branch was the last railway built by the Southern. It was constructed to serve ongoing suburban development south of Surbiton, and was intended to be a loop from the Dorking line southwest of Motspur Park through Chessington, rejoining that line at Leatherhead. Work was halted at the outbreak of war, and construction work was never completed beyond Chessington. As for Operation Steinbock, the raids on the London area came to an end on the 20th of April, with the Germans having lost 329 aircraft.
Pictures of pre-war holiday crowds packing the miniature Romney and Hythe Railway of Dymchurch. Believed to be the smallest public railway in the world, the toy train on the Kent coast carried hundreds of passengers every day over its 15-inch gauge permanent way. When the expected invasion of Britain swept everything into defence, the little puffer went in there and it came out here, a complete armoured train. The Romney Flyer, well armed and manned, took up station to guard the lonely stretch of Kentish coast, which was hers by pride of possession. The steel-plated midget was fully prepared to take a crack at any rosy Nazi trying to mess about on the shores of Romney, Hythe and Dymchurch.
A number of Army railway guns were employed on Britain's home front during World War II, and were normally based near to the coast in Kent. In April and May 1944, they were on exercises in Devon, where they were filmed by the Southern Railway Film Unit. En route to Meldon Quarry near Oakhampton on the southern main line from Exeter to Plymouth are two 12-inch howitzers, usually located around Guston north of Dover on the southern line to Deal and Ramsgate. Hauling the guns are two former GWR Dean class 060 locomotives. 108 of these engines had been requisitioned by the War Department. Those seen here were 2 of the 10 Deans fitted with pannier tanks and condensing gear. These scenes were filmed on the 23rd of April 1944. Meldon Quarry, located on the northern edge of Dartmoor, had been purchased by the London and South Western Railway in 1897 to provide track ballast. Since the early 1800s, large parts of Dartmoor have been used by the military as firing ranges, so the quarry at Meldon was the ideal location to set up these guns. All of the rail-mounted guns seen in this sequence date back to the First World War. These 12-inch howitzers served on the Western Front in that conflict and were designed and built by the Elswick Ordnance Company, part of the Armstrong-Whitworth Group. These are the Mark V version of the 12-inch guns introduced in 1917. Previous versions had the shell loading platform on a separate railway wagon. The Mark V relocated this to the revolving gun mounting, which also helped to balance it. They fired a 750-pound shell, which was filled with 83 pounds of Amatol high explosive. The guns had an effective range of over 7 miles. On the 7th of May, 2 more of the converted Dean-class locos head for North Taunton Station with 2 9.2-inch guns. These were to be set up in the goods sidings at North Taunton, again on the southern main line between Exeter and Oakhampton. These guns were normally to be found near Canterbury and Hythe in Kent. A Southern Railway U-class passes by with a passenger train. Another product of the Elswick Ordnance Company, 9.2-inch railway guns were first used in 1900 during the Boer War. These Mark 13 guns date to the later years of World War I and utilised Elswick's Mark IV carriage, introduced in June 1916. Another U-class loco passes with a freight train. These guns could fire a 380-pound shell over 12 miles. The 18-inch howitzer Boschbuster was filmed near Holwell Junction on the 14th of May 1944, hauled by Southern Railway diesel-electric shunter No. 3 and an ex-LMS War Department diesel shunter built by Armstrong Whitworth. This is on the line from Oakhampton to Bude and Padstow. These guns were developed during the First World War as part of the progression of ever larger howitzers on the Western Front, but did not enter service until 1920. They were placed in storage until late 1940, when one was mounted on the railway mounting Boschbuster, which had been used in World War I to carry a 14-inch gun. It was deployed at Bishopsbourne in Kent on the Elm to Canterbury line as a coastal defence gun. However, being a howitzer, its maximum range was 22,300 yards, halfway across the Channel. It was therefore given the task of bombarding landing beaches within its arc of fire should a German invasion occur. Hence, it was never used in action. Its mounting had a total of 15 axles, and when fired at high angle, had a pull of recoil of 420 tons. Consequently, it had to be fired along the line of rail as the whole mounting recoiled.
In these momentous days, the machines of peace are playing their part in the grim cause of war. The locomotive, which normally might have hauled a happy holiday train, now speeds the return of repatriated prisoners. Today, the machine not only calls to man, but to madam, and it calls particularly at weekends. Yes, these are some of the girls who put in a whole weekend cleaning engines at some LMS sheds near London. Blondie, like all the others, women and men, is busy on other war work for the rest of the week. Spring cleaning engines is big business, but these girls certainly shine at it, as you can see. kitchen boiler or engine boiler, if it's got to be clean, she gets cracking with a will and an oily rag. And do they pine while they shine? What do you think?
In the months leading up to the D-Day invasions, the American military began assembling in the southeast their many ambulance trains built from converted British rolling stock, some of which would be shipped to France after the invasion. One such train was filmed at Haywards Heath on the 22nd of February, en route from Lancing to Eardley Sidings, hauled by two Southern Railway B4X class 440s, numbers 2070 and 2052. Southern Railway C2X class 060, number 2543, a former London, Brighton and South Coast Railway engine, arrives at Hassocks Station in West Sussex on the 31st of March 1944 with a newly completed ambulance train. The rolling stock had been donated by the railway companies, and the cost of fitting out of the carriages had been borne by the Red Cross and the St John's Ambulance. The presentation ceremony was overseen by noted military commander, Field Marshal Sir Philip Chetwood. This heavy load of a 16-inch naval gun was filmed at Plumstead in southeast London on the 3rd of April 1944, hauled by former Southeastern Railway 01 class 060, number 1425. In the background is the Southern's North Kent Line electricity power station at Plumstead. The gun barrel would have been made at the nearby Royal Gun Factory at Woolwich Arsenal. Being transferred from lorries onto 60-feet-long railway flat wagons at Nine Elms are 37-ton sections of dock piers destined for the two temporary Mulberry harbours that would be assembled off the coast of Normandy after D-Day. The sections seen here form part of the floating roadways, codenamed Whale. These connected the pierheads to the land. The roadways were made from flexible bridging units that had a span of 80 feet, mounted on pontoons made of either steel or concrete. Each Mulberry harbour consisted of roughly 6 miles of these flexible roadways. This following section consists of film shot by the Army Film Unit in the run-up to D-Day, and starts with these scenes filmed at the old Newmarket station. Lloyd carriers of the Royal Dragoon Guards are loaded onto a train as part of the dispatch by rail of the 8th Armoured Brigade from Newmarket to its pre-invasion assembly area near Winchester. The two Army cameramen filmed the movement of men and machines at Newmarket from the 7th to the 9th of April 1944. troop train departs from Newmarket, hauled by LNER D16 class number 8797, one of a large number of 440s built by the Great Eastern to a design dating from 1900 by Stratford Works chief draftsman Frederick Russell. These are Crusader anti-aircraft tanks, fitted with twin Oerlikon 20mm autocannons, which could fire at 480 rounds per minute with a range of about 7,000 feet. Also being loaded onto railway flat wagons are a number of Mark II Valentine tanks fitted with 75mm guns. At this stage of the war, the ageing Valentines had generally been replaced in the European theatre by Churchill and Sherman tanks, with the remaining Valentines being used as command vehicles. Another troop train departs, hauled by LNER B17 class number 2817 Welbeck Abbey. Under the tarpaulin is a Sherman Firefly tank, a British variant of the American Sherman, fitted with a powerful 17-pounder anti-tank gun. Following on behind are a number of regular production Shermans, which were predominantly armed with the American M3 75mm tank gun. With the train loaded with Sherman tanks, the signalman at Newmarket clears the road for the train's departure, hauled by two more former Great Eastern locomotives, J19 class 060 number 8269 and B12 class 460 number 8538. This is Wood Ditton Level Crossing, just outside of Newmarket, where the crossing keeper, Mr. J.G. Hayward, closes the gates ready for the passing of the double-header. On the turntable at Newmarket Loco Shed is one of two Great Eastern built J20 class locos being prepared to haul the next trainload of Shermans. Designed by Alfred Hill, the Great Eastern's last chief mechanical engineer before the grouping in 1923, the J20s were at the time the most powerful 060 tender locomotives in Britain. preparations are made at the station for the arrival of more Shermans. From late 1942 onwards, the British purchased over 17,000 Sherman tanks from America under the Lend-Lease program. The two Army cameramen who filmed these scenes, Sergeant Ronald Watkins from Battersea and Sergeant Bill Cross from Hounslow, both from the Middlesex Regiment and attached to the 5th Army Film Unit, followed the tanks and troops into Europe after the D-Day invasion. But in late January 1945 were sadly both killed within 3 days of each other in the southeast of the Netherlands as Allied forces pushed towards the German border. This trainload of tanks, hauled by a D-16 and a J-20, was filmed on the journey to Winchester as far as Cambridge by the two cameramen. Back at Newmarket, the final vehicles we see being loaded on trains include these M5 half-tracks, armoured personnel carriers built by the American truck company International Harvester in Illinois, of which the British bought over 5,200, again under the Lend-Lease program. After the half-tracks come what were probably the most difficult vehicles to load correctly onto the flat wagons, Valentine bridge layers. With the folding scissors bridge in the Valentine's normal travelling position, their overall height was too great to safely clear railway bridges and tunnels, and so the bridge, which had a span of 34 feet and could take a load of 30 tons, had to be extended into the deployed position on an empty flat wagon in front of the tank. On the 11th of April 1944, a special train arrives at Newmarket, hauled by B-12 Class 460 number 8557. It was carrying General Dwight D. Eisenhower and his staff on a visit to inspect the work in progress, transporting the many vehicles of the 8th Armoured Brigade. Eisenhower was the supreme Allied commander in Europe, and was charged with planning and carrying out the Allied assault on the coast of Normandy in June 1944, along with the liberation of Western Europe and the invasion of Germany. No mean task. Eisenhower was accompanied around the railway station by the RAF transport officer in charge of loading operations at Newmarket. LMS Black 5 locomotives on goods train duties are seen in the railway yards at Harlesden and Willesden in North London on the 25th of April, filmed as part of the Army Film Unit's coverage of the important role the railways played in the build-up to D-Day, dispatching thousands of goods wagons conveying military and civilian supplies. Army cameramen Sergeants Robinson and Harris also filmed several of the War Department's Austerity 210 locomotives at Harlesden. These engines were based on the Austerity 280s, which were featured in Volume 2 of this collection. They had the same power output as the 280s, but had a lighter axle load, making them suitable for secondary lines. These were the first 210 locomotives to be used on Britain's railways. The wheel arrangement would later be used by their designer, Robert Riddles, for the BR's Standard Class 9F. Sergeant Robinson also filmed a journey from on board the brake van of a goods train travelling between Willesden and Northampton. The goods is overtaken by LMS 8F class, number 8606, on a coal train. Travelling in the opposite direction is a former London and North Western Railway G-Class loco on another goods train. The cameraman, Sergeant Donald Robinson, was killed in action on the 10th of July 1944 during heavy fighting by Allied forces to break out southwest of Caen in Normandy, where they had been held for 34 days by strong resistance from the 10th SS Panzer Division. In the siding is a train of Centaur tanks, many without their turrets. 48 Centaurs were landed on D-Day, providing close support for Royal Marine Commandos. From the 11th to the 13th of May 1944, Army Film Unit cameramen were at the Shropshire and Montgomeryshire Railway near Shrewsbury, which had been taken over by the War Department to service the Central Ammunition Depot at Nesscliffe. This is Ford and Crossgate Station, where we see locomotive WD-97 passing through with an ammunition train. The engine is one of the former Great Western Dean Goods locos requisitioned by the War Department. This is the same type of engine seen earlier hauling guns at Meldon Quarry, but without the addition of the pannier tanks. This engine was originally GWR number 2442. One of the Colonel Stevens light railways, regular passenger services had ceased here in 1933, leaving just roadstone traffic from quarries in the area. Another Dean Goods, WD-96, leaves Hookgate with another ammunition train. This engine was formerly GWR number 2425. operation of the trains and maintenance of the line was provided by the Royal Engineers. Their main servicing depot for engines and rolling stock was at Kinnerley Junction. This is the RE's mobile railway workshop, housed in converted railway parcels vans. The 060 under repairs by Royal Engineers Sappers is number 8108, a former London and North Western Webb coal engine, purchased by the Shropshire and Montgomeryshire from the LMS in 1930. Another Dean Goods, WD99, formerly GWR number 2528, works a passenger train conveying Army sappers along the line. The railway here was originally opened in 1866 as part of a grandiose scheme to provide a through route from London to Ireland. That plan came to nothing and the line closed in 1880. It lay derelict for 3 decades until it was reopened in 1911 by Colonel Holman Stevens as the Shropshire and Montgomeryshire Railway. Yet another of the Dean Goods locos, WD170, is seen from the train at Kinnerley Junction. Two engine crew from the Royal Engineers are shunting wagons in the goods yard with another requisitioned loco, an LNER J69 Class 060 tank, originally numbered 7088. '8182 was another Webb coal engine. This one was bought for £380. Out of use at this time was the diminutive 042 well tank Gazelle. The Army cameramen who filmed this sequence were Sergeant Wilkes, Sergeant Carpenter, and Lieutenant Peter Hanford, who had worked as a trainee sound recordist with London Films at Denham Studios before the war, and went on to work as a location sound engineer on many film productions. Peter Hanford also became famous amongst railway enthusiasts for his recordings of steam locomotives in the 1950s and 60s, issued on the Argo Transicord record label. On the 12th of May, the cameramen visited the secluded number 55 Vehicle Reserve Depot at Little Stretton in Shropshire, located alongside the Great Western Railway, midway between Shrewsbury and Ludlow. One of the many pre-invasion stockpiles of vehicles to be found around the country, this one contained large numbers of Fordson 1500-weight trucks, Morris light utility cars and Canadian military pattern trailer tractors. Several days later, the trio from the Army Film Unit were at the Royal Engineer Depot sidings at Long Marston, located on the now closed Great Western route from Cheltenham to Birmingham Snow Hill. In charge of shunting the wagons are a number of War Department Austerity 060 saddle tanks. From here, a large amount of materials destined for the D-Day beaches was being transferred south, including sections of pontoon bridges. A GWR Aberdare Class 260 drifts by with a goods train on the main line. Another goods train passes by, hauled by a GWR 280 freight loco. Empty wagons are loose shunted through the yards by Royal Engineer sappers. These sections of pontoon bridges were destined for the Royal Engineers at Juno Beach in Normandy in the days and weeks after the initial invasion. Waiting at signals on the main line is one of the USATC S-160 class locos. After the invasion of France, these locomotives were returned by the railway companies to the US Army and shipped across the Channel. The next stop for Lieutenant Handford and his two sergeants was to be Cambridgeshire, and as part of their journey they filmed some on-board shots between March and St Ives. This is the LNER's Whitemoor Marshalling Yards at March, the largest in the country, where we see another S-160 departing with its load. Whitemoor was split into two yards, one for dealing with up traffic and one for down traffic, with the main line from Ely to Spalding running between them. Each yard consisted of two main parts: the reception roads, into which trains to be sorted were run on arrival, and the classification or sorting sidings, into which each train was sorted out. Each yard had control towers from which the railway staff carried out the sorting and marshalling operations, with one man operating the points and one operating the electromagnetic rail brakes. The two main sections of the yard were connected by a hump. Wagons were pushed over the hump and allowed to run down the other side into the sorting sidings. The brakes, or retarders, closed in towards the rails and gripped the wheels of any wagon on the track, slowing them down to a safe speed and keeping a suitable spacing between successive wagons. Whitemoor worked 24 hours a day, with about 1,500 wagons being dealt with in each yard in one shift of 8 hours. Trains of 70 wagons or more were split up in 7 minutes. This would take about an hour in a normal goods yard. A major disaster was averted at Soham in Cambridgeshire on the 2nd of June 1944 by the brave action of the train crew of a heavy ammunition train travelling from Whitemoor Marshalling Yard, hauled by War Department Austerity 280 loco number 7337. As the train was approaching Soham, the driver, Benjamin Gimbert, noticed that cinders from the engine had set light to the leading wagon, which contained 44 500-pound bombs. Gimbert brought the train to a stop and, rather than running for safety, instructed his fireman, James Nightall, to uncouple the burning wagon from the rest of the train. Gimbert managed to draw the wagon about 140 yards before it exploded alongside the platforms at Soham Station. The blast killed fireman Nuttall immediately, and signalman Frank Bridges, who was on the opposite platform, died the next day. The driver and fireman were both awarded the George Cross for preventing further damage which would have occurred if the rest of the train had exploded. driver Gimbert, who had been thrown 200 yards in the explosion, was interviewed in hospital shortly afterwards.
Well, Mr. Gimbert, we're all very, very pleased to see you setting up and taking notice so well, and I'm sure everybody's very, very proud of the job you did. What do you think about it?
Well, I think I'm very lucky to be here.
Yes, I think you are too. Would you like to tell us what happened?
Yes, I was working an ammunition train through a little eastern county village when suddenly looking around I saw the wagon next to the engine on fire. I says to my mate, James Nightle, we shall have to stop and get it unhooked as soon as possible. On bringing my train to a stand, Farm and Nightle unhooked the blazing wagon. We ran ahead to the signal box and I told the signalman to stop all coming trains as I wanted to run and get out in the open with this blazing wagon. And I remember no more till after I was picked up in the rescue.
Well, that certainly was a wonderful experience. A very dreadful experience.
Yes, it was.
It was just bad luck that your fireman lost his life.
Yes, I don't think they can give too high praise for a lad of his age to go and unhook a wagon when it was ablaze like that was.
Yes, well, it's a very, very good job indeed.
Yeah.
Well, all we want to see now is to get you back on your feet again and get running around. What do you want to do when you come out of here?
Well, that's all I'm longing for, is to get back on the old engine again.
Get back on the old engine,
just to keep the wheels stirred.
That's the spirit. That's the spirit. Good show.
The largest amphibious invasion in world history, codenamed Operation Neptune, was successfully launched in the early hours of Tuesday the 6th of June 1944. An airborne assault of 24,000 troops began shortly after midnight, followed by an amphibious landing of Allied infantry and armoured divisions along a 50-mile stretch of the Normandy coast. By the end of the day, around 150,000 troops had been landed in France. Following the initial invasion, a continual stream of ammunition, equipment, supplies and troops was deployed from ports along the south coast of England to support Operation Overlord. An electric multiple unit departs from New Haven Harbour on the 9th of June, having arrived with a trainload of troops for transportation across the Channel. Another troop train arrives, hauled by one of the Southern C2X class O60s. Waiting at the dockside are a large number of LCIs, landing craft infantry. These 158 feet long steel-hulled ships could land 200 troops directly onto beaches. Larger vessels, including cross-channel ferries requisitioned from the Southern Railway, were designated as Landing Ships Infantry, LSIs. Setting sail for Arromanches is the former Southern Railway ferry Biarritz, which pre-war was used on the Folkestone to Boulogne route. On D-Day, she had acted as the spare standby ship for Assault Group J2 at Juno Beach. At the rear of the shot is SS Worthing, which used to operate between New Haven and Dieppe. Setting sail is the Isle of Guernsey, formerly used on services between Southampton and the Channel Islands. She had been at Juno Beach on D-Day landing Canadian troops. Filmed at London Waterloo Station, US troops await their train to Southampton and transfer across the Channel to the front. By the 4th of July 1944, 4 weeks after D-Day, the Allies had landed around 1 million men in Normandy. By the end of the war, over 3.5 million troops had passed through the port of Southampton. Hauling the train is Southern Railway King Arthur class, number 754, the Green Knight. A troop train passes through Haywards Heath station, hauled by Southern Railway Atlantic class 442, number 2423, the Needles. This is one of the road entrances to Southampton Docks, filmed on the 14th of June as American troops arrive on lorries. Being unloaded from railway goods vans are wooden boxes of K-rations, small packs of food designed for a few days' use under assault conditions. Scattered around the docks are a vast number of US vehicles and piles of supplies, all awaiting shipment to France. In Normandy, the 2 Mulberry harbours had been rapidly constructed. The one on Gold Beach at Arromanches, Mulberry B, was used by the British and Canadians. These American shipments would have been destined for the one on Omaha Beach at Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer. That temporary harbour, Mulberry A, was severely damaged in a violent storm just 5 days after these scenes were filmed. The hospital ship Isle of Jersey, another requisitioned Southern Railway ferry, was filmed at Southampton on the 17th of June. Allied casualties for D-Day alone were estimated at approximately 10,000. Including over 2,500 fatalities. A hospital train leaves Southampton's outer dock terminus, hauled by King Arthur class loco number 744 made of Asterlane. The facilities here at Berth 9 were normally used for the Southern Railway's passenger services to France and the Channel Islands. Southern Railway H15 class 460 number 476 departs with another hospital train from the passenger sheds at the White Star Dock. A week after D-Day, the Germans had launched attacks on London using its new terror weapon, the V-1 flying bomb. Primitive pulse jet-powered guided missiles that became known as buzz bombs or doodlebugs. Hungerford Bridge at Charing Cross was hit by a V-1 at 4:10 in the morning of Sunday the 18th of June. A large section of the bridge carrying the local lines was demolished and fell into the River Thames. This would take around 4 months to fully repair. Fortunately, the bridge carrying the through lines was largely unaffected, so trains could still use the station.
We can for the first time publish secret films photographed at the killing grounds in southern England. The guns, first line of coastal defence, open up on a victim. live of one of the 2,300 bombs that got through to the capital during the Second Battle of London.
At a crowded Waterloo station on the 23rd of June at 9:35 in the morning, a V1 just missed the main station building and exploded in the north sidings adjacent to York Road. A train standing at platform 20 was damaged, along with 18 EMU coaches and a number of goods vans and wagons in the sidings, where the Home Guards ammunition store was also set on fire. Vehicles on York Road were also engulfed in the explosion, which damaged buildings along the side of the station, including the access lift to the Waterloo and City line. 2 people were killed at the station and 37 injured. Victoria Station was hit by a V1 just before 2 o'clock in the morning of the 25th of June, setting fire to the general offices and badly damaging large parts of the station. 14 people were killed and 15 badly injured, most of which were servicemen sheltering in the station overnight. On the 27th of June, the tracks at Bricklayers Arms Junction on the line out of London Bridge Station were also hit by a V1 in the early hours of the morning. The blast also injuring the signalman in the box at Deptford Lift Bridge. Devastation was caused at Wimbledon carriage sidings at 10:30 in the morning of the 29th of June, when a V1 fell directly onto an empty electric multiple unit that was being shunted in the sidings, killing the driver and injuring 2 other railway workers. The explosion also caused damage to the lines to East Putney as well as the flyover, which carried the up-local tracks over the through lines. Clearance and repair work was rapidly undertaken and fully completed the following afternoon.
London under the flying bomb. Battle of Britain conditions return in the form of robot warfare on the capital. It's a civilian battle again. Citizens are both the target and the defenders. Every day, folk don their steel helmets and take duty on the rooftops. The bomb spotters who keep watch during daytime alerts and sound the warnings when immediate danger threatens. London's wartime calendar of experience may be set back 4 years, but the people adjust themselves to the frontline peril and carry on. The question of moving children from danger is immediately tackled. Past experience lends a hand in the smooth running of evacuation. Many thousands of youngsters are sent away from London into districts where the indiscriminate flying bomb doesn't reach. Whole schools and kiddies of anxious families moved from the terrors of blast and flying glass. The youngsters whom the Germans have no compunction in killing in their orgy of scatterbombing. To the northwest of England come the Doodlebug Expresses, as the children nickname the evacuation specials. Some of the young nuts of Knutsford en route to safety and friendly billets. Pathé cameraman Jerry Summers tags along beside the lines of children who get quite a little thrill at being in the eye of the newsreel. A quintet from America waves a greeting as the London County Council evacuation parties arrive at their rest centres. Plenty of willing hands and friendly folk are there to make the experience a pleasant one. While London fights the flying bomb, the children are being taken good care of.
The V1 attacks had provoked a significant exodus from the London area, with up to 1.5 million people relocating by September that year, although only a fifth of these were official evacuees. This is Carshalton in Surrey, where large numbers of children to be evacuated were filmed arriving at the station on the Southern's line from Victoria to Horsham. The evacuees arrive at London Victoria. From here, they would take the tube to another of the capital's mainline stations for onward travel to safer locations in the countryside. The London Transport AEC Regent arrives at Paddington Station with more evacuees, one of many busloads of children from the local area to arrive at the station that day. Many of these children were travelling by special train to the Rhondda Valley area of South Wales. The children walked down the old ramp from Bishopsbridge Road onto platform 10 and down into the now closed-off subway, which ran the width of the station and took passengers to the departure platforms 1 to 5. Plenty of refreshments had been laid on for the long journey to South Wales. The Red Cross also provided nurses to look after the children along the way. The cameras also filmed some scenes of the general passenger traffic at Paddington on what appears to be a rather busy day to travel. Here are the queues at the concourse end of the station for the 11:15 train to Birkenhead on platform 2. A Great Western pannier tank arrives with empty stock from Old Oak Common. Another pannier tank arrives at platform 3 with the stock for the next train, which would be travelling to Torquay, Paignton and Kingswear. more evacuees arrive at Paddington. These children won't have as far to walk across the station as their special train would be leaving from platform 10, which under normal operating circumstances was one of the arrival platforms. However, on a busy day such as this, the additional services would be fitted in wherever space allowed. This is Cow Lane Bridge on Copeland Road in Peckham Rye, which was hit and badly damaged by a V1 on the 12th of July. 6 nearby houses were also demolished in the blast and 30 badly damaged. The V1 attacks on London continued until October 1944. They gradually decreased in number as the launch sites on the French and Dutch coast were overrun by Allied forces.
8 new deep shelters are now open for the accommodation of Londoners. Over 100 feet underground, they're the last word in design. Double staircases and emergency lifts bring you into well-appointed quarters. Each has accommodation for 8,000 people who will sleep in tiered bunks. Precautions against the spreading of infection are thorough. Families are provided with cubicles in these shelters. Staffs of hospital nurses, doctors and ambulance crews have been appointed. The medical aid post is another feature of this ARP enterprise, which was built for the 1940 Blitz days and now used for the first time. Indirect lighting, air conditioning, dormitories for babies and comfortable canteens are all available to the people who shelter in these luxury tunnels below London.
The Southern Railway Film Unit returned to Newhaven on the 17th of July to record the ongoing work at the dock supplying bombs and ammunition for the war in France. Across the Channel, the fighting in Normandy was fierce and bloody as the Allied forces fought hard to capture the town of Caen and finally break out from the Normandy bridgehead. At Southampton docks, the Americans were transporting railway rolling stock across to Normandy using the Hampton Ferry, which had originally been built to carry railway sleeping cars from Dover to Dunkirk. The ship had been converted with the addition of a derrick weighing 258 tons that projected 35 feet beyond the stern for lifting heavy locomotives. Filmed on the 13th of July, Southampton's Marine Manager, Mr. H.A. Short, and Army officials inspect the loading of a US Army diesel shunter. The Southern's cameraman returned to Southampton on the 15th of August, where more US Army vehicles were lined up on the dockside awaiting shipment. Also converted in a similar manner with the addition of a derrick was sister ship, the Twickenham Ferry. Here, the carriages of an ambulance train, along with a number of wagons, were filmed being loaded onto the ship, shunted with care by one of the Austerity's saddle tank locos. Three days later, the Hampton Ferry was again filmed at Southampton. This time, a number of S-160 locomotives were being loaded onto the ship using the derrick. Over at 101 berth, a large number of American railway wagons were being loaded onto these large LSTs, landing ships tank, suitably modified with the addition of tracks on the tank deck to take the rolling stock. This is number 8 gate at Southampton Docks, filmed on the 11th of September. Close by, a temporary holding cage for German prisoners of war had been established. Here they were put through a screening process to separate the hardcore Nazis from the moderates, and would then be transferred by train to one of the many POW camps scattered around the country. One trainload of POWs departs hauled by King Arthur class number 782 Sir Brian. In early September 1944, as the last of the V1 launch sites in France were destroyed by the Allies, the government deemed that the threat on London was now over, and much of the flying bomb barrage of anti-aircraft guns was stood down. Here at Haywards Heath on the 12th of September, 3.7-inch anti-aircraft guns, which had been returned by rail from sites along the southeast coast, are fitted with wheels for travel by road to the nearest storage depot. Advances in technology employed on these guns, such as proximity fuses and gun lane radar, had helped to counter the V1's high speed and small size. The addition of Bell Lab's newly invented predictor fire control system, based on an analog computer, helped to bring the strike rate up to 74% towards the end of August. Attacks on Dover by German long-range artillery on the French coast at Calais had been ongoing since August 1940. On the 14th of September 1944, Dover Priory Station was hit and badly damaged by a high-explosive shell. The attacks were finally halted on the 26th of September, when the guns at Calais were captured by the advancing Allies. At Strood in Kent on the 22nd of September 1944, one of the Southern Railway's breakdown cranes was filmed being used to load a large number of T-17 Staghound armoured cars onto flat wagons. Around 4,000 T-17s were built for the British and Commonwealth armies during the war by Chevrolet in Detroit. Winchester in Hampshire on the 29th of September, a number of Cromwell tanks arrived by train at the station to be offloaded for onward transit by road to one of the many army camps near the city. Developed by Leyland and the Birmingham Railway Carriage and Wagon Company, The Cromwells were one of the most successful of Britain's World War II cruiser tank designs, combining reliability, high speed from its Rolls-Royce Meteor engine, a dual-purpose 75mm gun, and reasonable armour. There's also a brief shot here of a turretless Sherman armoured recovery vehicle towing a broken-down Churchill tank, possibly to be taken away on the same train. The Southern Railway Film Unit made several visits to Charing Cross to record work in progress on repairing the V1 damage to Hungerford Bridge, which had occurred back on the 19th of June. This is the scene on the 5th of September, as steel girders, which form part of the deck of the bridge, are lifted into place by one of these Southern's cranes. Moving on to the 1st of October, the bridge is now looking much more complete, with the new decking in place and running tracks in situ. The railway's engineering department have installed bridge testing instruments on the structure, ready for the first test run of a steam loco passing over the bridge. This honour was to go to N-Class 260, number 1817. The last visit by the cameras to Charing Cross was to be made on the 18th of October to witness electric trains finally running over the new span.
New wealth is harvested from rich farmland in England. At Britain's oil well number 1, the pumping goes on night and day, bringing a steady flow of highest quality petroleum from previously untapped reservoirs. Drilling began after British experts had made exhaustive tests in many parts of the country. Now, over 200 oil wells are in full production. Great storage tanks have been erected, special railways have been built, and each year over 26 million gallons of crude oil pour into tank wagons for transit to the refineries. These are oil supplies the Nazi U-boats cannot sink. No one realizes the value of these wells more than the farmers among whose crops and cattle the oil pumps throb. Here's what Mr. Percy Little has to say.
Well, I suppose it's all for the good of the cause, helping to win the war. If I'd have been in Texas, I might have been a millionaire by now, but Let's get old Jerry put out of action and then we can get on with the job.
To mark the 1 millionth American to pass through Southampton docks, a brief ceremony with the mayor took place on the 25th of October 1944. The millionth Yank was Private Paul Scheimer Jr. of the 15th Infantry, 3rd Division, 7th Army. On the 1st of November, an electric multiple unit arrives at New Haven Harbour Station, carrying more troops to be transported to France. By the end of October 1944, Allied forces had made great advances in northwest Europe, liberating much of France, Belgium and the Netherlands, and capturing its first major German city, Aachen. The next day at New Haven, the cameras filmed yet more German prisoners of war being marched along the quay from their ship to be taken to the railway station. Whilst the terms of the Geneva Convention stipulated that prisoners of war should not be forced to work while in captivity, many German POWs held in this country chose to work rather than sit around the camp doing nothing. Those that chose to either worked on farms, in the construction industry rebuilding homes damaged by bombing, or clearing bomb damage. On the home front, London and the southeast had come under renewed attack from Hitler's latest weapon, the V-2 rocket, a short-range ballistic missile. This is Hampton Court Junction near Surbiton on the main line to Waterloo on the 2nd of November, where a V-2 explosion had torn out part of the downside railway embankment and damaged the wing wall of the flyover carrying the Hampton Court branch line. The nearby signal box was damaged as well. With warheads filled with a ton of Amatol, the V-2s were capable of inflicting immense damage on their targets.
Using stratosphere rockets dropped on us from 60 to 70 miles up, Germany is engaged in another form of terror raiding. To flying bombs is added V-2, another wholly indiscriminate weapon used as a morale booster for the German people. It's the truly typical effort of the mortally injured Nazi beast to attempt to tear down everything as he goes under. Traveling faster than sound with a warhead weighing a ton, V-2 descends at something like 2,000 miles an hour. People of southern England are enduring this latest ordeal just as they took the Blitz, the fire raids and flying bombs at their worst.
Also hit by a V-2 on the 2nd of November was the Southern's Hither Green goods yards, causing extensive damage to the track, buildings and nearly 100 wagons. It would take 5 days to clear up the mess and get all the track work and signalling reinstated. Widespread devastation was caused by a V2 in Bermondsey, South London, on Sunday the 5th of November. Another V2 had exploded at nearly the same spot just 10 days earlier, killing 8 people and causing major damage in the area. The second explosion demolished part of the Southwark Park Road railway bridge, known locally as the John Bull Arch. This carried the up and down slow lines and the up local lines of the railway out of London Bridge Station. While the other running lines suffered only minor damage and were soon reopened to train services, the section of bridge which had collapsed into the road had to be completely rebuilt. This would take 4.5 months to complete. The second explosion, which occurred at 5 to 11 in the morning, had killed another 3 people and rendered 123 houses and shops in the surrounding area unfit for habitation. The attacks were to continue until the 27th of March 1945, by which time the V2s had killed an estimated 2,754 civilians in London and injured over 6,500. With German forces no longer on the French coast, Britain's cross-channel artillery began to be decommissioned. With its gun barrel already taken away, work to dismantle and remove the remaining parts of Channel Gun Poo were filmed on the 9th of November at Martin Mill near Dover in East Kent. Two guns had been sighted here early in the war: Winnie, named after Winston Churchill, and Pooh. They were both 14-inch naval guns which had been taken from the stock of spares for the battleship King George V. One used a mounting taken from the battlecruiser HMS Furious, which had been converted into an aircraft carrier, and the other a mounting from a test range. The guns were located on a branch which had originally been built in 1897 to bring in materials from the main line at Martin Mill during the construction of Dover Harbour. The branch had been reopened during both World Wars to deploy guns along the cliff edge. During World War II, the line was entirely worked by diesel-electric shunters. The smoke from a steam locomotive being visible above the cliffs would have given away the gun's position. The trainload of gun parts was filmed north of Higham Station in Kent, hauled by a Southern Railway 060. By the 1940s, the Southern Railway had never really embraced any form of mechanised track laying, instead relying on the widespread availability of cheap labour to lay rails the traditional way. However, following many years of war in which the fit and able men who would otherwise have been doing work such as this on the railway were conscripted into the armed forces, the ever-increasing labour shortage at the time prompted the Southern to investigate economical ways of introducing machines into the track-laying process. These scenes were filmed on the 12th of November 1944 between Kenley and Whiteleaf in Surrey, on the branch from Purley to Caterham. One of the Southern's Grafton steam cranes uses a specially manufactured grab assembly to transfer the pre-assembled track panels to and from the flat wagons. Whilst the LNER had pioneered the use of self-contained track-laying machines in Britain in the 1930s, the Southern would have been unable to get authorization to build such equipment during wartime due to restrictions on the availability of materials.
Meet the girl who's porter and weightlifter all in one. Madge Irison, champion of the Carry a Bag, Sir Brigade. Her biceps wouldn't disgrace the strong man in a circus, and she can lift 3.5 hundredweight. When she took on her job at Euston Station 3 years ago, men passengers were inclined to walk along beside her carrying their own bags. But Madge likes to earn her tips the hard way. None of that weaker sex stuff about her. Now, the men porters who smiled when she first turned up at work are laughing on the other sides of their faces. By now, Madge has got quite used to walking around like a Christmas tree hung with parcels. She really enjoys her work and wouldn't change it for any of those soft jobs that were once looked upon as only suitable for girls. But there's just one snag about being a strong woman. When Madge gets married, how will she manage to get her husband to believe that she can't carry in the coal?
New Haven Harbour railway station was badly damaged on the 22nd of November. This was not caused, however, by enemy action, but was the result of a rather unfortunate accident. During a storm in the night, an ammunition barge, which was laden with high explosives, had come adrift from its tug in very heavy seas and come ashore on a beach minefield, where it exploded at 5:10 in the morning. Along with the station, the blast from the enormous explosion damaged many buildings in the town. Late November at Waterloo, and American military ambulances arrive at the station carrying injured men from the Free French forces who were being repatriated to France. Awaiting them at the station was one of the US Army's hospital trains, which would take the wounded to Southampton for travel across the Channel by ship. Although France at this time was not completely under the control of the Allies, Paris had been liberated by American and French troops on the 25th of August. The fascist Vichy regime had been ousted, and Charles de Gaulle had returned to the city to become Prime Minister of the new French provisional government. Two LMS engines, 4F class number 4515 and 8F number 8554, arrive at Malvern Wells Hanley Road Station in Worcestershire on the 10th of December 1944 with a US Army hospital train, filmed by the American military's Special Coverage Unit number 15, one of their many film crews recording the war in Europe. The wounded American servicemen were brought here to Malvern Wells to be taken by road to the nearby US 55th General Hospital, which had been established at nearby Blackmore Park. Several other US military hospitals had also been set up around Malvern, providing a total of nearly 1,100 beds.
Last train out, usually a crowded one, carrying passengers who fraternize freely in an atmosphere of tobacco smoke and hops. But where that picture ends, another begins. The working day of a corps of women employed by the London Passenger Transport Board has started. They're the Mrs. Mops of the Underground, the women who dry clean the miles of tunnel in our vast subterranean railway system. In other words, Pathé cameraman Frank Basil is introducing you, in this exclusive story, to a section of women war workers known among themselves as fluffies. They go down on all fours to sweep and scrape up tons of fluff and dust that we have left behind in our travels. It coats the insulators of the conductor rails, becomes impregnated with metal filings from brake blocks, and packs up in every corner and crevice. Charlie, walking along there, is the foreman. A sweet job for a fella who likes a little bit of fluff. There's no time for reading between the lines, but a fag helps to take the taste of dust out of her mouth. It's a dirty job, all right. The walls of the tunnel are coated thick. Perhaps you hadn't realized it, but that is an accumulation of dust and fluff from passengers' clothing. A potential danger because it's inflammable. All contributions are gratefully received by the fluffy in charge of the dustbins. Early morning scene as the gang knocks off. It won't be long now before the current is switched on again for the first train of another day. Look out, Mum, you'll have the wall down. The only luxury in as tough a job as any is a cup of cha. Way underground, they moisten their dusty throats as dawn begins to think about breaking. Yes, you've got to get up early to catch the fluffies.
A rare piece of colour film comes courtesy of the Great Western Railway's photographic department and records working life at the GWR's wartime headquarters at Aldermaston in Berkshire, shot in late 1944. At the outbreak of war, many of the GWR's office staff who normally worked at Paddington were moved away from the danger zone of central London to the relative safety of the countryside. A number of additional office buildings were constructed here at Aldermaston to house the workers displaced from Paddington. Many of the GWR staff volunteered as ARP wardens and were filmed taking part in a number of training exercises. Here they are aircraft watching, which in this case are Dakotas with their post-D-Day markings. The ARP wardens had their own Coventry Climax Godiva trailer fire pump to tackle any blazes caused by falling incendiary bombs. This exercise for wardens involved rescuing a stretcher case from a rooftop using a block and tackle arrangement and a rather long ladder. On hand to take the casualty to hospital is Aldermaston's own ambulance, resplendent in Great Western chocolate and cream livery. These are the entrances to some of the air raid shelters on the site, located beside the railway lines. Even at this late stage in the war, the British authorities never discounted the fear that the Germans might resort to poison gas attacks. Hence the wardens keep up with their anti-gas training in the entrance to the goods yard. Other office staff were trained in first aid procedures, and here come to the aid of a fellow worker who has unfortunately fallen off of her bicycle. Many other railway workers joined the Home Guard, and on this occasion the Aldermaston platoon were filmed in the station yard during an inspection by the area commanding officer.
The story begins with the ballot, units of the British Second Army making one of the first draws for Blighty leave. After almost 7 months since D-Day, every man in the army had certainly earned much more than a few days' leave in Britain. But obviously only a comparatively small number can be on leave at any one time. At this moment, however, when the lucky leave winners are coming home with souvenirs to distribute and amazing stories to tell, we in Britain would wish to thank them and all their less fortunate comrades for what they've done during these 7 months. They stormed the fortress of Europe in a direct assault across the Channel. They fought and won at Caen. They and their American comrades smashed the Hun at Falaise. They pursued him across the Seine. They drove him out of almost all Belgium. They beat him back in Holland. And now, a few at a time, they're coming back to spend a week with families and friends and to see how the home front has been getting along while they've been away. Just imagine how they must be feeling as they travel homewards. If the men coming on leave were feeling good, how about the wives and sweethearts, the friends and relations who were waiting to greet them? At the station in London, there were big crowds to cheer the men on their arrival. The first official leave since D-Day had begun. Naturally, London was by no means the end of the journey for most of the men. No time was lost in London by those going north. 7 months of fighting, 7 months of victory. These were almost forgotten by the men coming home, but they're not forgotten by the people of Britain, who throughout those 7 months have been at home.
Everybody listen, Jay. Listen. You that said fight to King's Cross? Yes, not bad.
One of the London, Midland and Scottish Railway's requisitioned ferries, Princess Maud, arrives at Dover on the 26th of January 1945, bringing home British Liberation Army troops for some well-deserved leave. They board their train at Dover Marine Station, an impressive four-platform terminus covered by a full roof, originally opened by the South Eastern and Chatham Railway in 1919. Departing with one of the special troop trains is another of the Southern's King Arthur class locos.
Cathay Pictorial takes you to Euston Station to listen to a voice that thousands of travellers hear every day.
453 Stranraer will leave from platform at 12, calling at Dumfries and Stranraer only. This train conveys sleeping cars to Stranraer. The 450 train to Stranraer will leave from platform at 12.
And now let us introduce you to the girl behind the voice, Mrs. Dorothy Harris, a housewife and mother of 2 children. When her husband was sent to the Middle East, she applied for the job and got it, because the railway company liked her voice.
The 450 train for Stranraer will leave from platform at 12, calling at Dumfries and Stranraer only. This train conveys sleeping cars to Stranraer. The 450 train for Stranraer will leave from platform at 12.
Mrs. Harris's job isn't only announcing trains. She also acts as a fairy godmother to passengers in distress.
Here is a special announcement. Will Mrs. McGregor, who has just arrived from Glasgow, please go to the station master's office on platform 6, where a message awaits her.
Come on, Mrs. McGregor, get cracking.
One sign that things were gradually getting back to some sort of normality in this country was the resumption of passenger ferry services to France. The Isle of Guernsey arrives at Newhaven on the 16th of January 1945 with the inaugural service from Dieppe. Seen earlier in this programme taking troops to the Normandy beaches, the Isle of Guernsey had subsequently had the landing craft davits and guns and radar removed prior to returning to a normal job. With the return of ferry services came the return of boat trains, and the first of these departs from Newhaven Harbour, hauled by former London Brighton and South Coast Railway Marsh Atlantic, number 2425, Trevose Head. The following day, another Marsh Atlantic, number 2038 Portland Bill, arrives with a boat train at Newhaven Harbour, carrying passengers for the Isle of Guernsey's first run back across the Channel to Dieppe. Even this late in the war, women were still keen on taking the opportunity to join up with the services and do their bit for the country. On the 9th of February 1945, a number of ATS recruits were filmed at Waterloo Station, en route to Guildford. In December 1944, the Southern Railway had commenced building a second batch of 10 of their Merchant Navy-class Pacifics. The naming ceremony for the second engine of that batch, number 21C12 United States Lines, was held at Waterloo Station on the 10th of April 1945. Along with officials from the Southern Railway, guest of honour at the ceremony was Admiral Roscoe Ernest Sherman, who at the time was Commander US Naval Forces Europe, London headquarters, and had served in the US Navy through both World Wars. American soldiers on leave were filmed departing from Waterloo Station on the 17th of April 1945, catching a train which was again hauled by United States Lines. As the war in Europe began to draw to a close, large numbers of British and American troops were filmed on the 4th of May arriving at London Victoria Station on leave. A troop train arrives hauled by King Arthur class number 780 Sir Persant. In Europe, on the 30th of April, Adolf Hitler had committed suicide in his bunker as the Battle of Berlin raged above him, and on the 4th of May, with Italy and Berlin already surrendered to the Allies, Field Marshal Montgomery took the unconditional military surrender of all German forces in northwest Germany, Denmark and the Netherlands. Another troop train arrives, hauled by number 523, one of the Southern's S-15 class locos. Over the next few days, other parts of Europe were surrendered by the Germans, until finally, at 0241 on the morning of the 7th of May 1945, at the Allied headquarters in Reims, the Chief of Staff of the German Armed Forces High Command, General Alfred Jodl, signed the unconditional surrender document for all German forces. Victory in Europe Day was announced to the nation on Tuesday, the 8th of May 1945. The war in Europe was over.
This was the British people's finest day. The day, the end of the German war. Throughout the country, at homes and at work, a nation exploded with spontaneous rejoicing for a great and wonderful deliverance. war scarred the face of Britain, but nothing ever sapped or changed the character of our people. An all-embracing jubilation rings out in the victory peal from St. Paul.
Hostilities will end officially at 1 minute after midnight tonight, Tuesday, the 8th of May. But in the interest of saving lives, the ceasefire began yesterday to be sounded along all the fronts. The German war is therefore at an end. We may allow ourselves a brief period of rejoicing. Today is Victory in Europe Day.
A number of War Department Austerity 280s passed through Red Hill in Surrey. Filmed at Dover on the 9th of May 1945, the first day of peace in Europe, more of the WDs are loaded onto the Hampton Ferry to be taken across the Channel to France. This was a notable day, as it saw the shipment of the 1,000th British-built freight locomotive to mainland Europe. The 1,000th loco had been specially named Longmoor, in honour of the Royal Engineers Military Railway at Longmoor in Hampshire. After their work was done in Europe, over 700 of these 280s returned to work on Britain's railways, whilst 184 remained in mainland Europe, mostly working in the Netherlands.
5 years ago, I promised you blood, toil, tears, and sweat. And your untiring response brought us, in the end, victory over Germany. Today, we still have tears. Not so many, thank God. But the conquest of Japan, hand in hand with our American allies, is a formidable undertaking which we must and will see through to the end. And we must still look forward, alas, to blood and sweat. We have a terrific task ahead of us. We have a shattered world around us, and we must help to rebuild it. We must strive for a sane and just peace which will save us all and our children from the constant fear of war.
By the end of the war, 6 years of government control under which little financial investment had been made in the railways had left them run down and worn out. They had been worked to the limit whilst having to cope with the constant threat of enemy attack and carrying on regardless, despite only essential maintenance being undertaken on the track and rolling stock. The courage of the men and women of Britain's railways had played a vital role in the nation's war effort. 395 railway staff had been killed whilst on duty, and over 2,400 had been injured. Thousands more railwaymen who had joined up to fight for their country would never return home. This has been the story of Britain's railways at war.